The title of this shir slash shmooze, not quite sure what to call it, the unity of Purim. A few years ago I spoke about this similar topic, some of the same ideas. At that point I titled the shmooze, the unities of Purim. But then I figured that's an oxymoron. Unity is unity. It's all one thing. It's not just lots of one things. All one thing. So let's talk about some of the fundamental ideas that are spoken about Purim, and a little bit about how we can apply this to our own lives. Omar Rav. So let's look at the source sheet. Okay. Number 1. Omar Rav. More in Sanhedrin, in the parak the section that deals with the coming of the Mashiach. Kol hakitzim, all of the cases, all of the ends of days which have been suggested, which have been derived from Psukim in the Tanakh, they're all over. They're finished. The matter of the coming of Mashiach is only talui, it only depends upon tshuva and ma'asim tovim. Ushmuel Omar, Shmuel disagrees. He says, Dayo le'avel she'amod be'evlo. It's sufficient that the mourner, the avel, should stand in his mourning. And Rashi has 2 interpretations there. One pshat is, Kodesh Baruch Hu is the mourner because he brought about the destruction, and he wants the redemption of the Jewish people. The other interpretation, Rashi says, the other parish is the Am Yisrael is the mourner. So he says, things are so bad that Bnei Yisrael will be redeemed even without tshuva. And the Gemara says, Kitanoi. This is really a machlokas tanoi, the machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Im Yisrael osin tshuva nigoli. If Am Yisrael does tshuva, they'll be revealed, they'll be redeemed. V'im lav ein nigoli. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Omar lei Rabbi Yoshua, im ein osin tshuva ein nigolim. How could that be? There's not going to be a geula. But he says, but you're right. We have to do tshuva. So how is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to arrange that there should be geula which will come through tshuva? El HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamid lahem melech shekzerotav kashot kahaman. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring upon the Jewish people a king whose decrees are as severe, as difficult, as cruel as Haman. V'Yisrael osin tshuva. And because of those decrees, which will be brought, those gzerot which will be brought against Am Yisrael, Yisrael osin tshuva umachzira lemutov. And this will bring them back to the proper path. So, Haman, or somebody like Haman, isn't just a figure out of our past. Haman is something which Chazal tell us is likely to happen, and it's likely that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring about the Geula through a Melech Koshek Haman. Another famous Gemara, which has been spoken about many times in Shabbos about Matan Torah. Vayisyatzu b'tzachti sahar, says that the Jewish people, this is source number 2, the Jewish people stood under the mountain, Omer Avdimi, Barchama, Barchasa, Balamit, Shekof HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aleim, Es Har Kegigis. The Omer Lahem, he held the mountain over their head like a barrel, and he said to them, Im atem mekablim haTorah mutov, v'im lav sham teheit kfuraschem. If you receive the Torah, good. If not, this will be your burial place. Omer Avacha Bar Yaakov mikamod Rabba l'Oraisa. That this was a moda'ah. This was a kind of caveat that the Bnei Yisrael could use to excuse themselves if they didn't keep the Torah, because they said we were forced into it. So not something that we accepted b'lev shalem. Amar Rava, afal pikein hadar kiblu b'mei Achashverosh. But nonetheless, they accepted it in the days of Achashverosh. T'chsiv kimu v'kiblu al-Yehudim kimu ma shekiblu kvar. That there was a new Kabbalah Satorah at the time of the days of Achashverosh, right? That the Am Yisrael accepted the Torah, received the Torah on a level which they hadn't experienced before. The Kabbalah Satorah of Am Yisrael at that time went deeper than the original Kabbalah Satorah at Har Sinai. And therefore, that erases the Modor Rabbah, that excuse that we had. And Rashi says, right, B'mei Achashverosh, the second Rashi there, Me'avas anes yonas elehem. It was because of the love of the miracle that was done to them. The miracle, they were Mekabel the Torah because of their love of the miracle that they were saved from the decrees of Achashverosh and Haman. So, before we go further, just to think about that a little bit, what's the interconnection between the Nes of Purim and the Kabbalah Satorah, especially as we've spoken about that this new Kabbalah Satorah, according to the Medrash, the Medrash Tanchuma, was a Kabbalah Satorah specifically for the Torah Shebal Peh. As the Medrash tells us that the Torah Shebichsav, Bnei Yisrael accepted more willingly. That was the Nasa v'Nishma. But the Torah Shebal Peh, that was something which needed an extra push. And that came about at the days of Achashverosh, at the days of the miracle of Purim, and it was Me'ahavas Hanes. What's the connection between them? So we heard from Rabbi Hirshfeld, Zichrono Livrocha. What's the difference between hearing and seeing? Torah Shebechsav, if something is written in front of you, you see it. Torah Shebal Peh, you hear it. What's the difference between seeing and hearing? So when we see something, somebody walks into the room, right? If the lights are closed, it's dark, you turn on the lights, and you see everything at once. The whole picture is open in front of you. That's when you see something. When you hear something, you hear one word after another, one sentence after another, one paragraph after another, and what you have to do is the listener becomes involved in the process because he just doesn't see it as one big thing, as one vision in front of him, but he has to put it together in his mind. The listener has to be able to connect what he heard, the first words that he heard, and the second words that he heard, and the third words. Everything has to be put together. Everything has to be unified. Because when you hear the words, they come out one at a time. And if you don't have that koach of shmiya, of being able to hear what's being said, and be able to comprehend, and be able to see the connection between things, so then you're not going to understand what's being said. And that's what the Purim story was, as we all know. The Purim story was putting things together. Was being able to see how the history, the events that happened over decades, a long time from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, was something that the Jewish people had to put together. When they saw the power of putting things, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu operates, by putting things, by telling us things, but not telling us, to see it, right? As a revelation, a Kriyas Yamsuf, a Makas Bechoros. No, it wasn't like that. It was something that you had to think about, that you had to use your own koach of combination. So that led them to understand that that's the Torah Shebal Peh. That's how we have to hear Torah. Torah is something that we have to work at, that we have to be able to put together different pieces of it. And this was the Avas Hanes. So when we contemplate our nation's history from its inception until this present day, we have to see hidden patterns. We have to see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is speaking to us over the course, not of just decades or years, but of hundreds of years, centuries, millennia. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting together. Mention something that we heard from our dearly beloved Rav, colleague, Rav Mendel Farber, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, Rebbe in yeshiva for many, many years. Unfortunately, most of you did not have the zchus to learn from him and to experience his elevated personality. He would quote from his Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, and if Hutner would say that when Mashiach comes, the first shir kloli he's going to give. How is he going to give a shir kloli to what's he going to talk about when he gets all the people together? It's going to be a shir kloli in Jewish history. That's what it's going to be. How to explain how all of the different things fit together. All of the things that we don't understand. Why was there this and why was there that? Why was there a Holocaust and why was there all the terrible things and pogroms and et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're trying to say. Well, let's go focus a little bit more on the story of Purim itself. And the story on the national level, we just spoke about, Kodesh Baruch Hu reveals himself in his hiddenness, even behind the scenes, even when he's not explicitly there, he's not doing revealed miracles. But we see that Kodesh Baruch Hu exists all the time. He's always with us. The Chassam Sofer says he's so much with us that even when the Jewish people were sinning, he was already preparing the ultimate redemption. Even at the time when they were sitting at the suit of Achashverosh. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he was so with us that he was already prepared. This whole story started with Vashti and her getting into trouble. And the whole beginning of the story was even when we were sinning. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us under all circumstances, and that's what we have to see. But it's not only on a national scale. It's also, when we think about it, on an individual scale. Let's look at source number 3. The Gemara tells us in Megillah, Yeshno Am Echad, that the Gemara Megillah is darshaning the psukim of the Megillah, and get to the pasuk, Yeshno Am Echad. This is what Haman said to Achashverosh in his pitch to get Achashverosh to agree to his plot to kill all the Jews. So he says, Yeshno Am Echad mefuzar u'meforad beinu amim. There is a nation who's scattered and divided among the nations. Amar Rava, leka diyada lishna bishaka Haman. There's nobody who could speak Lashon Hara as well as Haman. Amar le tar nechlinu, Haman said to Achashverosh, let's destroy them. Amar le, Achashverosh said, mistapina me Elohav, delo lavi bikaravi kamoi. I'm afraid of their God. Look what happened to other people who started up with them. Right? Even his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar, right? That didn't come to a happy end. Right? And back all the generation, I'm afraid. So he says, Amar le yoshnu min ha-mitzvos. The darshan yeshno am echad. There's yeshno, the drosha is yoshnu. They slept. They're sleeping. Amar le, but Achashverosh said that because isbuhu rabbanan. But they have rabbis. And the rabbis presumably keep the mitzvahs. Amar le am echad. So according to one interpretation, it means no, they're all the same. Even the rabbis aren't keeping the mitzvahs so great anymore. According to one of the interpretations I saw. And then he says, Shema tomar korcha ani osev malchusecha. Maybe you'll claim that I'm wiping out a whole section, a whole province. No, they're mefuzarim. They're scattered. Shema tomar ein hanoam ein minahu mefurad. They're mefurad. There's two elements here, right? That mefuzar umefurad. We want to talk about what's the mefuzar and what's the mefurad. Mefuzar literally means scattered. Meforad means divided, pirud, separated. So, the interesting thing about the Purim story, as opposed to all of the other stories that we have with Bnei Yisrael, were under the gzeros of the evil kings, is that in contrast to all the others, in the Purim story, there are really two antagonists. There's Achashverosh and Haman. We have Paro, we have Antiochus, and we have all kinds of times when there's one guy who's coming to kill the Jews. Here we have two. We have a combination. They're double teaming us. We have Achashverosh coming from one side, Haman coming from the other side. And it's no coincidence that when the Gemara discusses the sin of the Jewish people at the time, why were they deserving of having this terrible gzeira brought against them? So the Gemara brings two sins. And source number 4. Shoalu Talmidav as Reb Shimon ben Yochai, why did the Jewish people deserve, at that generation, did they deserve to be wiped out? Amr lahem, Imr latem, you tell me, Amr lo mipnei shenanu misudaso shel osa rasha. Because they had a noah from the Suda of their Russia, of Achashverosh. Achashverosh made this grand party, invited everybody, all the citizens, and that included the Jews. The Jews came, as we know. And came, but the question was, should Shushan Yargo, should B'cholah Kula Al Yargo? So if that's the case, then maybe only the Jews in Shushan should be killed, not all the other places. Amrulo, so they said, that was Reb Shimon's answer. Amrulo, so they said back to Reb Shimon, and Morata, you tell us. Amr lahem mipnei shehishtachavu litzelim. Because they bow down to this idol. They bow down to this figure of Haman. So, here we see that just like we have two antagonists, but each of these sins is representative of one of them. The sin of Nenem Esudos Shel Achashverosh was the sin of indulging in the physicality. What was the quality of the Persians? Interesting Gemara. The Gemara says on source number 5. Right? The Gemara says that in the underlying part, the Darshan is a pasuk, Dov Shokek, the bear. Dov is the bear. Zeh Achashverosh. The Chsiv Bey is written about Achashverosh, V'oru, in Sefer Daniel, V'oru, then Chiva Achrei Tanina, another animal came forward. This is the one that's in the vision of Daniel, represents the Persian Empire. Damiel Dov. It's like a bear. Why a bear? Tani Rav Yosef. Elu Parsim. These are the Persians. She'ochlein v'shosin kedov. They eat and they drink like a bear. U'misurbolim basar kedov. And they're heavy and fat like a lot of flesh like a bear. U'megadlin seyar kedov. And they have wild hair like a bear. Ve'im lehem menucha kedov. And they don't have any rest like a bear. So, according to Chazal, the Persians were the Malchus that represents the indulgence of the physical. And this is what Achashverosh knew how to do. Right? Achashverosh, he was a Baal Taiva. He was somebody who, as a Baal Taiva, he ran after women, as we know, the whole story of the Megillah. And he ran after food. He had a mishnah of 180 days. Okay. So this is one aspect of the sin, was that the Bnei Yisrael were drawn to the Gashmias of the Persian Empire. The other half is, right, they were Mishtachav El Etzelim. They bowed down to the idol, they bowed down to this figure of Haman. Haman, right, that's a kind of Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says, why weren't they, if they really were Oved Avodah Zarah, so then they should have really been destroyed. So the Gemara says, but they only did it externally, outwardly. They didn't really accept it. But there was something which attracted them, which brought them to either externally have some kind of a relationship to Haman. Now, as we know, Haman, descendant of Amalek, Haman Hoagagi, he's the descendant of Amalek. So the other pole of the sinning of the Jewish people, on the one hand, it's the Persians who are full of the Gashmias, and the other hand, it's Amalek. What do we know about Amalek? So, it's source number 6. Right, and this is what we're going to be reading on Shabbos, Parsha Zohar. Zohar es asher asalacha Amalek b'derech b'tzeischem Mitzrayim. Remember what they did to you. Asher korcha b'derech. They korcha. Amalek was korcha b'derech. And then they ran after all the weak ones among you, and you were tired, and Amalek did not fear God. It says Rashi, just below, Asher korcha baderech, Lashon Mikre. What Amalek stood for, was Mikre. There is no guiding principle in history. There's no hashgacha. There's nobody there nobody runs the world. The world has all been Mikra. It's all something that happens just because that's the way things are. And the Chazal tell us, Rashi tells us, that this was really a punishment for the Bnei Yisrael, and earlier in Parshas B'Shalach, for asking, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu with us or not? Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu with us? Is He not with us? In other words, they sinned in something and saying that they didn't see the Hashgacha involved in their lives. And so, Vayavu Amalek came. That's it. If you look in the next line, from the Medrash and Esther, Vayaged lo Mordechai es kol asher karahu. When Mordechai was trying to communicate with Esther was in the palace, and Mordechai wanted to communicate to her about what the tragedy was that was about to befall the Jewish people, or the Gezerah of Haman. So it says, he spoke to Hasach, the intermediary, and he said to her, everything that happened to him, but if you look at the word karahu, that's exactly the same word as mikra, the same word as korcha. And Chazal says, Amar lo lahasach, lech emor, go tell Esther, ben beno shel karahu bo alechem. Who's the karahu? It's the grandson, the great grandson of the karahu of the Asher Korcha Baderech. So these are the two aspects of what Achashverosh stands for is the Gashmias, and what Amalek stands for, Haman stands for, as being the descendant of Amalek, the grand representative of Amalek, is the idea of Mikra. So, what are we supposed to take away from this? So let's look at these two things, one at a time. Taiva, pleasure, right? The desire for pleasure, the lust for pleasure, that leads to meforad. It leads to being separate. The Gemara, the Pasuk says, Taiva yevakesh nifrad. When people are involved with Taiva, they're separate. When people are involved with Taiva, when they're satisfying their own physical desires, so that's all they have in mind. They don't have in mind any other people. It's true that the people of the Bnei Yisrael went to the Sudas of Achashverosh, but the point that is emphasized is nehenu. They had hana. When you go to have hana, you're thinking about yourself. You're thinking about your belly. You're thinking about where's the roast beef and where's the wine and how can I fill myself up. Whenever, there's a stomach yesod to know, whenever the governing principle, the motivating principle is taiva, is lust, there's no room for love. Those are two opposites. Because lust separates people. Right? Everybody's interested only in their own pleasure. Right? Ava means I'm interested in the other people. So the Bnei Yisrael were separated from each other because they were involved in their physicality. Mefuzar. Mefuzar means that things are separate from each other. This has nothing to do with that. Right? This one event doesn't follow from another event. One event does not cause another event to happen. Everything is separate. I don't see any patterns. I don't see that just because I did a sin, something bad to me happens. I don't see just because I did a mitzvah, something good to me will happen or did happen. I don't see any connection between things. That's meforad. Everything is separate. Everything is compartmentalized. Every event is an event upon itself, which happened. Korcha, mikra. But it's not an event which I can connect in my mind to all the other events that are happening around. So when Haman says mefuzar or meforad, Haman was speaking very precisely. They're mefuzar and they're meforad. They're mefuzar because everything is separate. Meforad, because they're into their taivas. And we as individuals are also mefuzar, meforad. We're also that kind of thing. We all know we have a neshama, we have a nefesh. Right? Everybody's right, a neshama, a higher part of our soul, which is connected to ruchnius, which is connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? A neshama from above. And we have the nefesh, we have the animal soul, the soul which is connected to our physical life. And who are we? Because we're scattered. We're pulled apart. Right? Sometimes we go with one, sometimes we go with the other, sometimes this one wins, sometimes that one wins. But who are you? What's your identity? So we have identity crisis. We think about it. We sit down, right, and say, who am I? Well, yesterday I learned the Geschmack Seder. Oh, that was good. That was my neshama. I really had a Geschmack Seder. And then, well, in the evening, let's not talk about it so much, right? I was pulled in the other direction. Right? My nefesh got the better of me and pulled me down. And so that's one degree of being scattered. Right? Also, just, do we see patterns in our life? Do we see things happening to us on a personal level that we see hashgacha? Do we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu involved in our lives? Do we see that our actions have consequences that bring about results in the spiritual world? Do we see that? We're mefuzar and meforah. But I mentioned the neshama, I mentioned the nefesh. In between, there's the ruach. In between, right? The ruach is the spirit, that human spirit that makes us human, that connects the two, that enables there to be a connection between the two parts of us. And ruach is, as Chazal say, as was famously known, right? Ruach is the ruach mimalila, the speaking spirit. The ability to speak, that's what defines us as human beings. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the power of speech for? Basically, to be used for Torah and for Tefillah. That's the primary use of the power of speech, to use in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? And even if we do other things other than sit in the base meditation, davening and learning, but everything that we do, the speech that we have, should be expressions of our humanity, of our spirituality, and we speak nicely to people, we speak honestly, we speak in a way which befits in an Oved Hashem. That way we express our humanity. And chas v'sholom, we can corrupt our speech, as we all know, but the speech is there to, the use of the purpose of the speech is to create that connection between the neshama and the nefesh. And that's done through Torah, right? Torah is the way that we can take the communication from above and filter it down into our lower parts. We learn the ideas, we learn the concepts, and we filter it down. It goes through the ruach, through our speech, and then it becomes part of us. It becomes ingrained in us. We spoke about last week at the bris the same idea that we spoke about, that there's an imprint on the goof itself. It makes an impression on the body because the goof itself becomes kadosh. That's what we mentioned. That's why it's not so strange to think about getting drunk as being a kind of avodas Hashem, because it's an expression of the kedusha of the goof itself, because the Torah has made an imprint upon it. So we're scattered and mefuzar and meforad. The way to put things together is, as I mentioned at the beginning, is limud haTorah, which forces us, if we learn Torah well, if we learn Torah, when we think about contemplating, not just trying to get external information, but when we think about the koach of the Torah to put ideas together, to contemplate, to think, what does it mean? How can I relate ideas to each other? And how can I make some sense out of the whole picture? So that unifying, that koach hashmiya of the Torah is what can help us overcome those twin Yetzer Haras of mefuzar and meforad by making us into whole people, by focusing ourselves on the avodas Hashem of learning Torah. Torah gives us purpose and direction. It gives us a picture of what a human being looks like, what he should strive to look like. And as we strive to bring unity to the diverse parts of sugya, we bring unity and focus to ourselves. Every piece of Torah that we work on and conquer and know is the perfect antidote to our tendencies to move towards fragmentation and randomness. So, the Jewish people were saved because they overcame that. As I mentioned before, Kodesh Baruch Hu, if you want to look at a grand picture, an overarching picture, Amalek has a very, very powerful role in the development of the Jewish people. And a positive one at that. Amalek was the one who attacked us, Berfidim, before Kabbalah Satorah. And what did that bring out? It brought out a special koach of tefillah. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do in the parsha of Amalek, at the end of Parshas Beshalach? Moshe Rabbeinu stood on the Givah, he stood on the hill, and he raised his arms up, and he prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with upraised arms. And the Gemara and the Pasuk says, when the Bnei Yisrael, when Moshe raised his arms up, that's when the Jewish people were victorious. And when he lowered his arms, so then they would lose. Then the Amalekim were victorious. And as the Mishnah says in Rosh Hashanah, did Moshe Rabbeinu's arms wage war? V'chiyadav shel Moshe osos milchama? Was that waging war? No. When he raised his arms, so then the eyes of the Jewish people were lifted up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they davened, and they prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that brought the victory. And the opposite was true when the arms were lowered. Then they didn't lift up their arms. So Amalek had a tremendous koach. Whenever Chazal tell us that whenever there was a building of the Beis HaMikdash, it was always preceded by a war against Amalek. In the times of Shaul, before David HaMelech became the king, so Shaul had to wage the war against Amalek. And that was part of creating a situation of getting the Jewish people ready for the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Before the building of the second Beis HaMikdash, we had the Mulchama against Haman, against the Amalek of Haman. Amalek has a tremendous role to play as being the foil, being the counterpoint to our Avodas Hashem, to arouse within us a understanding that if we don't go the negative part, if we don't do what we're supposed to be doing, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then that road leads to destruction. The road of not fighting Amalek leads to destruction. And that's something that we've been heard over and over again in our history. In the times of Haman, the prayer was, right, what did Esther say to Mordechai? Lech knoset kol haYehudim. Gather them all together, v'tzumu alai, and fast for 3 days and 3 nights, and daven and pray, and that'll bring about the Yeshua. Right? So in the days of Haman, that's what happened. So as we started out with the Gemara, right, in the end of days, Ein Yisrael Nigalim Ela B'tshuva. Right? How are we going to get to the tshuva? So if we can't get smart enough to do it on our own, if it doesn't emanate from an inner sense that this is what needs to be done, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mamid Aleim Melech Koshik Haman Chas v'Sholem, we shouldn't have decrees against us, but Chazal tell us that it may be what has to happen in order for the Geula to come. We'll close with the prophetic words of the Ramban in Parshas Beshalach, the last source on your sheet. The Ramban says as follows. It says, when Moshe told Yoshua to go wage war against Amalek, why was he so worried? Says the Ramban. So we'll read it inside together. Yitachen shepachad Moshe. It could be that Moshe was afraid. Pen yitgaber becharbo. Maybe Amalek will overcome, will be victorious with his sword. Bipnei heyoto am nochel hacherev. Because Amalek is the nation which inherited. That's part of his heritage, the sword. Mi birchata zaken, from the blessing of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu gave a bracha to Esav, she'amar lo ve'al charbecha tichya. Amalek was the grandson of Esav. He says, the bracha was given, you will live by the sword. Ki ha-milchama min ha-mishpacha hazot, because the war against this family, the nation, the family of Amalek, hi ha-rishona v'achrona l'Yisrael. It's the first and the last. The first war that was waged against the Jewish people was by Amalek. And as Rashi tells us, they cooled off the bath. It was a hot boiling bath and everybody was afraid nobody wanted to touch the Jewish people. Right. Amalek volunteered, dived in, got burned, but it was worth it. Cooled off the bath. And that's the first war, the Achrona. And it's also going to be the last war. The war against Amalek is going to be the ultimate final redemption. Ki Amalek mizera Esav, because Amalek is from the seed of Esav. Umimena ba ilenu ha-milchama b'reshit hagoyim. It says, right, Bilam says, Reshit, in the parsha of Balak, Reshis goyim Amalek. Right? Amalek is the first of nations. Reshis goyim Amalek. Right? You thought that Jewish people were the Reshis. As Rashi says, Bereshis, in the beginning of the Chumash, Rashi says, Bereshis b'shvil Yisrael shenikra Reshis. Right? But Chazal tell us, why does it say Bereshis? Beis Reshis. There are two Reshises. There's a Reshis of Yisrael, there's a good Reshis and a bad Reshis. And Amalek is the bad Reshis. The bad Reshis, Amalek is there from the beginning, because Baruch Hu put into the world the negative forces. There is a Reshis going Amalek, but as Bilam prophesied, Ve'achriso adeoved, at the end, that Reshis is going to be completely lost, completely destroyed. He was put into this world not because he has a place in the world. He was put in the world because he has a function to play in order to get the real Reshis from the beginning of days to the end of the days. He's there to move us, but not to be there, not to survive. He's there to consume himself in his war against us. But as the Ramban is saying, Umimenu ba eleinu ha-milchama b'Reishis hagoyim. He was the Reishis hagoyim, and he's the first one to fight against us. Umizarel shel Esav haya lanu hagalut v'acharbu acharon. And who destroyed the second temple? Who sent us into this golus that we're experiencing today? Kasher yomru abotenu she'anachnu hayom b'galut Edom. Today, our golus, the fourth of the Arba Malachim, is the golus of Edom. Identified with Rome in Chazal, but this is the golus of Amalek. Edom is Esav, and Edom is Amalek. The kasher yenutzachu, but when he will be overcome, when he will be overpowered, when he will be defeated, v'yechlashu v'amim rabim asher ito, and many nations, he and many nations who are with him will become weakened. Mimena nivasha le'olam. From this will be the salvation, the everlasting salvation for the Jewish people. Kasher Amar, as the pasuk says in Ovadia, right, the nevuah about Esav, and the nevuah about the ultimate redemption, psukim that we say every morning in our tefillas at the end of Psukei de Zimra, V'yolu Moshiim b'Har Tzion lishpot es har Esav. There will become a salvation from Har Tzion to judge and punish the mountain of Esav. V'Yisah Hashem Hamlucha. And then the ultimate kingdom will be Hashem's, and then we conclude another pasuk. Interesting what the Rambam finishes. Everything that Moshe and Yoshua did at the beginning, Yasu Eliyahu Mashiach ben Yosef im Zara. At the end of days, there's going to be, just like we had a twin. The fight against Amalek was a partnership between Moshe and Yoshua. Moshe prayed, Yoshua fought. So then also there will be a partnership between Eliyahu and Mashiach ben Yosef, right before the coming of the Mashiach, of the real Mashiach ben David im Zarav. V'al kain hit ametz Moshe b'davar, and that's why Moshe, took this so seriously. Moshe fought. He put everything he had into this fight, because he knew that this fight is not just a local fight and not just one that had to do with his contemporary time. It was a fight, right, which would determine the course of history for the rest of the world until the ultimate Geula. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu said that, right, go fight them and wipe them out. And this is the mitzvah of Zohar Asher Amalek. So, Al-Kem Yitam Es Moshe B'Davar. So, just to conclude, everything that we have, all of the things that seem to be pulling us apart, we need one thing to bring us all together. And that is the Koach HaShmiya. The Koach to hear. The Koach to see, right, the different things and how they fit together. To be able to put together in our history, there was an Amalek at the beginning, there's an Amalek at the end. The Ramban could do this, and we have to understand and we have to follow in his footsteps and see that there's a beginning and there's an end. And Amalek is the beginning, Amalek is the end. And Achashverosh is in the middle. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of contemporary Achashveroshes. Right? If you allow me one personal thought, I was thinking that Trump has a lot in common with Achashverosh. If you think about it. Right? Certainly, he's an outstanding Baal Taiva and an outstanding Baal Gaiva, and anything else you want to attribute to the Persian Empire, right, is right there. Right? So, Kodesh Baruch Hu should help us, and we should be zocheh to see a true Yeshua, a true Kabbalah HaTorah, of being able to hear the depths of the Torah, and we should be able to be zocheh to see La Yehudim Hoysa Ora V'Simcha V'Sason Vikar.